Good evening, and thank everyone for being here for the February 26th Dorchester County Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. It is determined that we do have a quorum for tonight. Mr. Dixon, if you would please do the invocation for us.
Let us all pray. Eternal God, our Father, we thank you tonight for your blessings. We reverence you now in this meeting. We thank you for your peace, protection, and provision. And we ask you to cover us now and go before us and with us and bless us in this meeting to your glory and honor. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. If you'll stand and please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. All right, at this time, the board will entertain a motion to accept the minutes from the November 20th, 24 board meeting. Is there any discussion, additions, deletions, or corrections of those? Hearing none, we'll move to, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Dixon. All in favor, vote by the usual signs. Aye.
Aye.
Ayes carried. All right. Our first bit of business tonight is a variance request from section 13.2 to reduce depth of the required buffer. The applicant is Dominion Energy. Mr. Administrator, if you would kick us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We received this application request for a variance to reduce the required use buffer on a piece of property that Dominion owns adjacent to their transmission line to build a transmission substation along Sand Ridge Road. This is about 2 miles south of Highway 78. The applicant here does not have enough land to develop the site for the substation and to further meet the buffer yard requirements of section 13.2 as highlighted in your staff report. The area adjacent to this proposed development is primarily wooded land. There's old sand mine. It is zoned AR, however, agricultural residential, so a single-family residential site can be on there. You'll see to the west, southwest there is one home on the site. So buffering here is really falling back on the zoning, not the use. Typically, our buffer yard requirements are based on use. If it's a vacant use, then we go back to the zoning. The zoning would have single-family or ag on these, so that requires a buffer yard that they cannot meet. The applicant here has provided responses for the standards of a variance in their application, which is attached to your packet. After reviewing the request, staff provides the following facts. First question, the property owned by the utility here is not sufficient to meet their building requirements, as well as the county's use buffer requirements. There's also a large overhead power line easement on the property, limiting the ability to plant the full buffer on all sides. Number two, the applicant did not adequately address the second standard for variance in their responses. However, we noted it is recognized that a utility substation needs to develop in certain areas adjacent to transmission lines and in areas close to those areas in demand for utility service. Number three, the property is not adequately sized for the full development under our regulations. The applicant would need to find a new site or attempt to purchase additional land from neighboring properties to be able to meet the requirements. Number four, again, the applicant didn't adequately address the fourth standard for a variance in their response. However, we recognize that the use buffer here is intended to minimize impact to neighboring properties to avoid substantial detriment. The applicant has provided a landscape plan which shows trees and shrubs on the edge of the property as well as a 6-foot tall privacy fence surrounding the substation. It is not feasible to provide 50-foot buffer in all areas due to site development and an existing overhead transmission line. However, it may be feasible on some areas of the lot. If the board is to determine that this is adequate for screening, then it could be determined that the authorization of a variance would not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent properties. Based on these facts presented in our analysis, staff finds that if the board does determine that the impact to neighboring properties can either be mitigated by additional plantings or is minimal, that the applicant meets the requirements for a variance and therefore would recommend approval of the request. I'm available for any questions, and I believe the applicant is here as well.
Thank you. Any further questions of staff by any of the board members? All right, is the representative for Dominion here? Yes, sir. Please come forward and state your name.
Thank you. My name is William Lamb. I work for Thomas & Hutton, engineer for Dominion Energy for the
Okay,
project.
William, if you would raise your right hand.
Sure.
I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I promise to tell the whole truth, or the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir. All right, so just fill us in a little bit more on what we may not see here in black and white.
Sure. So kind of zooming out a little bit, I did kind of want to make the point that the purpose of this substation is really twofold. My understanding is there's a renewable natural gas plant going in nearby. So part of the purpose of the substation was to provide the system capacity to handle that load from that new renewable natural gas plant. The other part of it would be to provide a redundant system for the town of Dorchester area. Right now, I believe they rely on a single substation, so if a transformer, for example, were to fail, it would take out that whole area. So it was a way for Dominion to kind of accomplish both of those things with one project. They did consider, obviously the site constraints. I guess the depth of the substation is really determined by the minimum standards they need for the electrical equipment they have to put in there. And also there's a 10-foot safety buffer they require around the outside of the fence for grounding, and just, you've got high voltage equipment in there just for safety. So those kind of set the minimum constraints for the site itself. If they were to try to find an alternate site, the problem with that is this is kind of the ideal location, being adjacent to the existing transmission and distribution lines. An alternate site would require extension of transmission lines and clearing new right-of-way, so that would be, disruptive as well. So this was kind of the ideal site for them.
Okay, any other board members have any questions for the representative?
You're just essentially just going to just increase the footprint itself because of you're expanding and increasing the number of nodes in your grid
The footprint, you say?
of the site, for the equipment to allow for expansion.
Right now, there's no substation on the site, so
Okay, all
the
right.
purpose would be to construct a new substation on this.
So this is a clean site, but you're just,
Right, it's a clean site with the exception of the existing transmission line right away.
I see.
As you can see on the aerial photo, that wooded portion is, scrub pine trees, basically.
okay.
You'd mentioned a safety buffer of 10 feet from the fence line. So is that what this gray area is on, you have a site plan?
Yes.
So you have the 10-foot buffer for that safety fence?
Right, so with the buffer yard we have proposed, which I believe was about 19 and a half feet, accounts for the minimum dimensions for the substation plus the 10-foot safety buffer. So that's what we'd be able to provide with this layout.
And what type of material is that, just chain link fence?
It would
Safety buffer.
probably be either a wooden or a synthetic wood privacy fence.
Okay. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's going to be another fence on the outside of that around the outside property?
I don't believe so. My understanding is it would just be a fence around the substation, like where the equipment's located. The rest of the property would be more
Just planted?
open and planted, yeah. And as you can see on the landscape plan, we had proposed, evergreen plantings around the perimeter to try to maximize what we could fit in the available buffer.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else here to speak for or against? This time we'll close public comment. Board is open to a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the request based on the fact that the power lines present a unique constraint, and also the location It's gotta be around power lines, it's gotta be off a main path, so, so for that, I make a motion that we accept this.
All right, Mr. Scogan has a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, vote by the usual signs. Aye.
Aye.
I believe the ayes carry. Variance is granted. Thank you, sir. Next, we have a variance request from section 915A to allow density to exceed one principal dwelling per land of acre. The applicant is Patrice Felder. Mr. Administrator, if you would,
Thanks.
the details.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. The applicant here is requesting relief from the density requirements of the AR Agricultural Residential District Standards. The applicant is seeking to add a manufactured home on the lot, which has an existing septic system from a previously placed manufactured home that has been removed for some time. Property is 1.6 acres and again zoned AR. The AR district does not allow for density to exceed 1 unit per acre. All other conditions of the district can be met with the exception of density. This lot was previously zoned absence of controls. The AC district was established in 1984, at that time with no minimum zoning requirements regarding use, lot size, or density. It was amended to require a minimum lot area of 14,500 square feet in 1998, and then again amended in 2019 to now require a 1 acre minimum lot area per dwelling unit. The code amendment was in 2019 to require 1 acre per dwelling was intended to prevent future subdivisions that would be out of character for the rural areas. It was, however, not intended to prevent existing property from continuing to be used as it had previously been used. The applicant has provided responses regarding the standards for a variance on their application, which is attached to your packet. After reviewing the request, staff provides the following facts. The lot in question is a legal conforming residential lot with 1 structure on it. The lot previously had a second home, but is no longer large enough to subdivide into 2 lots under current zoning district regulations. The second septic tank remains, and the lot can support reestablishment of a second home, but the 2019 amendment to the code prevents it. We did also include the septic installer's inspection of the septic system and site plan in the staff report for your reference. Number 2, the property across the street is a 1 acre and has 2 dwellings on it. The density in this surrounding neighborhood is similar to what is being proposed. Number 3, without the variance, the owner would not be allowed to reestablish the second dwelling unit on this property because it has been gone prior to our amendment to the ordinance in more than 2 years. Number 4, the authorization of the variance to allow reestablishment of the second dwelling on the property would not be a detriment as there was previously a second unit and the density in the neighborhood is established at a similar density. Based on the facts presented in our analysis, staff finds the application can meet the requirements for a variance and therefore recommends approval of the request.
Thank you, sir. Any further questions of staff at this time? All right, is the applicant, Ms. Felder, here? If you would, please come forward and just state your name.
Good evening, Patrice Felder.
Ms. Felder, if you would raise your right hand. Promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, so again, like the previous gentleman, just kind of fill us in on any kind of details that, what we have here might not tell the whole story if need be.
Yes, sir. So I am the applicant. My aunt is the owner of the home. She has a 3-bedroom mobile home, 3-bedroom, I believe 2-bath or 1.5 bath, that she's wanting to move from where it currently is onto the property at 308 Coburn Town Road. And so there was a home there, I believe back in 1984, there was a mobile home there. I believe it was a 3-bedroom. So we're just asking to have another mobile home moved on that lot.
Okay. Does anyone from the board have any questions?
I do, just one. Did I see that there's already a second septic tank and everything on the property because of that previous home that was there?
There is, and so we've already had it inspected, and it's approved. I believe that's in the packet as well. But there is a septic that is set up and ready, as well as a dirt pad if it's approved.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are no further questions, thank you, ma'am.
Thank
You
you.
may be seated. Anyone here to speak for or against? All right, we will close public comment. This time, the board is open for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with the findings and facts, the analysis and everything by staff, and so I would like to approve the application.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I second it.
We have a second by Mr. Dwight. Any further discussion? All in favor, vote by the usual signs. The ayes have it. Your variance is granted. Thank you for coming. Our next piece of business is a variance request from Section 1042F to allow the primary residential structure to be built or placed behind an existing accessory structure. Applicant is Garrett Dowdy. Mr. Administrator, if you would.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. We received this request to allow placement of a primary structure behind an existing accessory structures on a large 6.65 acre, single-family manufactured housing lot on Muskie Drive, which is in the Twin Lakes subdivision, just off of Central Avenue. Property owner has been clearing the lot and has two accessory structures that were at one point behind an older primary structure that has since been removed. The accessories were permitted properly, they just tore down the house that was in front of it. The applicant has provided a site plan showing their proposed location of a new home behind the existing accessory structures. I included a photo of the property as it pretty much currently stands. The applicant has done some grading on the site and cleared, of course, demoed that building, noting that there's some heavier soils within that front yard, as well as a pretty small envelope to put a home in, with the setbacks, et cetera. So they're looking at their site and wanting to put their primary structure now behind these accessory structures as noted here. We're not unable to permit that. There's really no other options for us other than to just deny the permit. So the applicant has asked for a variance to allow them to put the home in what would be rear of the accessory structures. This is not permitted by the staff, or by the ordinance 0413. The applicant has provided responses regarding the standards for a variance on the attached application in your staff report. After reviewing the request, staff provides the following facts. One, the lot has soil characteristics and existing buildings that provide a unique circumstance for placement of a new primary home. Soils at the front of the property have been reported to be heavy clay soil. There's a small buildable area within this front yard due to existing accessory buildings. However, the extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property may justify a variance. These conditions, number two, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. If there were not an existing structure here, the applicant would just simply be able to place the home and put the accessory buildings behind it. However, the accessory structures exist, so in order for him to take care of that, he'd have to remove the existing accessory structures. Number three, without the variance, the owner would again need to remove the existing accessory structures in order to be able to place the primary home and septic system in compliance with the district regulations. I also noted in the staff report, they did inquire about hooking up to sewer and water, and it's not available at this site yet. Number four, the authorization of the variance may have minimal impact on the rural neighborhood. This existing accessory structure is 100 feet back from the road right-of-way. It's not up very close to the road, so there is an increased setback for that. Based on these facts, if Board of Zoning Appeals concurs, the staff would find the applicant can meet the requirements for a variance and would therefore recommend approval of the request.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any members have a question for staff? All right. Is the applicant present or representative thereof? Oh, please come forward. State your name, please.
Teresa Dowdy.
Oh, hi, Ms. Dowdy. If you would raise your right hand. I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Great. All right, just, again, kind of just fill us in a little bit.
All righty. We're applying for this, well, of course, we agree with zoning regulations, but applying this uniform set of regulations to properties which vary greatly in size, topography, access, and present state by the previous owners has created an unjust and unfair situation for us on this residential property. We're not asking for a variance to use it for something other than residential. We're only asking to be able to use it for its intended use as currently zoned, which is residential. We're only asking to vary the setback. We would build at the front if it were possible, but because of the inability to extend the public sewer, which we would have paid for the extension, but they said because it's gravity fed and the main is too low, they wouldn't be able to do it. And because there's not enough room for both a septic and a home because of an existing building, as well as the presence of only clay soil, we can't. The strict setbacks requirements are unnecessarily burdensome, and by granting this variance, you would do substantial justice to us in allowing us to use this property for its intended residential use. The practical difficulty of building at the front within the allowed setbacks was not created by anything done by us as the current owners, and as the zoning stands, it totally prevents improvement of the property in a manner that's reasonable, customary, and consistent with neighboring properties. Discovered during clearing, it was found that at some point in the past, 2 mobile homes and 2 septic systems were installed near the proposed site. So it's assumed that it would be feasible for a building to go there. One of them is caved in and one of them is functioning. I do have a site map, but I see you already have that up there, so that's it.
Thank you. Any of the board members have any questions? Yeah, go
Do
ahead.
you have any perk tests to show that that front area is not, won't perk?
No, we don't. Because there wasn't enough room,
Right, so you're laying low.
so, yeah. So, but we did, check into an extension, to pay the extension, but they said because it was gravity fed and the main was low,
That's to tie into the,
to tie into the main sewer.
so those structures that we see on the overhead, those are there right now?
Yes.
Okay, so the original house was in front of there?
Well, it was an old RV.
Ah, okay, I see. Yep.
There's, I had some street views. There was a bricked-in mobile home too. The address point here, there was an old house there prior to them purchasing this that was in place, and then they put an RV on top of it.
But then a lot significantly changed after that with the other structures. Okay.
All right. Anyone else have any questions? Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate it. Anybody else wish to speak for or against? We will close public comment, and the board is open to motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve this, based on the fact that there's several constraints. The lot size is definitely a unique constraint where you don't have the room up front to place a house with adequate drain field. There's questions that it might not perk up there. And also the accessory structures are providing a unique placement hardship.
All right. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Dixon. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, vote by usual signs.
Aye.
And the variance carries. Thank you, ma'am. Your variance is granted. All right, and our last variance request is from section 13.2, which is to reduce the depth of a required use buffer. The applicant is Quality Automotive Services. Property owner is Tupper's Joint Properties. If, Madam, or Mr. Administrator, if you would, go ahead and give us the details on this.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. The applicant here is requesting a variance again to reduce the required use buffer to develop an oil change service station along Orangeburg Road near the intersection with Central Avenue in Knightsville. The applicant is unable to achieve the required distance of the undisturbed buffer per the requirement with their proposed development layout and design. The adjacent property next to where they are seeking the variance to reduce the buffer is developed with a manufactured housing community. It's a little different than the previous required reduction because we are now able to go based on use, not on zoning. we consider manufactured housing community as either single-family residential or other residential. Both of them require a B buffer, which is highlighted in your staff report. The applicant is proposing to reduce that required 50-foot buffer to what appears to be on their site plan, even maybe less than 15 feet in some locations. However, 15 feet would be the bare minimum they would be able to go within our code. With conditions where an applicant provides a 6-foot privacy fence, they may be able to reduce the buffer to the next level up, which in this case would allow reduction to 25 feet. So we could have allowed them to go down to 25 feet through code without having to come before the board. In conceptual review, staff suggested alternative site design. However, any alternatives here may require obtaining cross-access through adjacent properties. We had initially kind of hoped they could get through the Waffle House parking lot here. There is a small retention pond at the back of the Waffle House. There's no regional retention that the Waffle House is on their own. So they'd have to cross through that. Publix, of course, would probably be quite a battle to get in the back there, and then there's some wetlands and other issues to contend with. So they're kind of limited in that, and they have a site design that really requires some connectivity within the lot. The applicant has provided responses regarding the standards for a variance on their attached application form. After reviewing the request, staff provides the following facts. 1, the lot in question is a legal conforming general commercial vacant lot. The required buffer is based upon the proposed use of the property. There are other permitted uses requiring lesser wide buffer yards, which would provide more developable area on the lot. What I mean by that is within the general commercial district, there are other uses that are permitted by right, which would require less of a buffer than auto sales and service. That requires a higher buffer than, say, retail or office space. Staff does not find that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property, as it is a matter of choice for the applicant to develop the lot with the proposed use. Number 2, the same standards apply to other properties in the vicinity, and the required use buffers are intended to ensure compatibility with adjacent uses of differing intensities. The adjacent manufactured housing community should expect to be protected from nuisance factors through this provision. Staff finds that these conditions do generally apply to other property in the vicinity. 3, without the variance, the owner would not be able to develop the property as they currently have designed. Other design and uses would still be able to be utilized to develop this property. Number 4, the authorization of the variance to allow reduced buffer could be a detriment to the adjacent residential property, as the intent to provide adequate buffers for different use types is clearly for the reduction of nuisance factors by both distance and density of vegetation. Development consists of building and associated activities, and a drive aisle for customers to access and utilize the site is not allowed to encroach into a buffer yard in other instances. Staff has made a recommendation to deny the request for a variance based on our analysis. I do want to note that we received a letter of support from the adjacent property owner here, which is that area in question that would have the requested reduction in buffer yard. We received that 2 days ago, so I sent that to you via email, and that's available to the public if they need to see it. And the applicant has asked that they can present on their behalf as well. So I'll turn it over, of course, to you, Mr. Chair, and I'll open up PowerPoint that they have prepared as well. So I'll help them guide through that if they need. So thank you.
Great. You made mention of other commercial uses that would be more conforming with less buffer. Just for point of reference, what are those other commercial uses that require less buffer?
So this auto sales and service requires buffer yard B. I can pull up, I have it on my, there's a various amount of permitted uses within the general commercial district that would have a less of a buffer. And actually, I should say the applicant has done a little bit of research on that and wanted to discuss that as well.
Okay.
But
But I mean, would we be talking, would it be like a restaurant, or, you know, what kind of activity may it be classified in?
do restaurants and full service have different, do you know?
Quick service has a buffer on their drive.
So I believe a drive-through, and I don't want to tell you unless I have it pulled up here, but I believe a drive-through would require a buffer yard that's a higher intensity, whereas like a sit-down restaurant without a drive-through wouldn't have as much. We have a use table, and I highlighted just the auto sales, service, rental, and leasing, which is land use 2110 in your staff report there. Other general commercial uses, general sales, service, rental, and leasing adjacent to other residential would require a buffer yard A, so they could reduce that to a 15-foot with a fence.
Okay.
Postal service, library, some utility services if it's small enough, arts, entertainment, recreation, education, public administration, healthcare, and other institutions, so like clinics.
Okay,
That gives you an idea.
that does. Thanks. Anybody else have any questions for staff?
Yes, I was wondering, could you please just go back and verify? We've talked about buffer B, 50-foot, the residential, 25. Are we looking at, they want to get down to 15 feet? Do they want to get down to 7 feet? What exactly what are some of the closer numbers?
Well, at this point, they've only submitted a conceptual plan. The board could give them a limit. My recommendation, if you were to approve it, would not to be go any less than 15 feet, because our code doesn't go any less than 15 feet. However, the board, in granting a variance, could set conditions, whether it's adding more planting to achieve 14 feet, but the applicant hasn't provided specific detail as to exact plans of how they're going to develop it. So it's difficult for me to say exactly what it might be, but 15 for staff would be the limit that we would.
Okay,
Feel
so
comfortable.
in other words, we're being asked to make a decision on something that they've given us half-part information on?
Becky, I guess at this point somewhat, because it's not a fully developed plan.
Okay, and just to verify, the Tuppers own this property, and the Tuppers also own the mobile home.
Yes,
And that's the letter that we got saying that they approved this being implemented, or it being okay.
Recommended or supported it, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any further questions of staff? All right, if the applicant or representative would please come forward and.
Hello,
Good evening.
My name is Paul Lawler.
Paul Walter?
Lawler.
Lawler,
L-A-W.
thank you for clarifying. Raise your right hand. I promise to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Promise to tell the whole truth. Nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you. All right, so help kind of paint more of a picture
Yeah.
for, I guess, some of the little nuances that we may be missing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've prepared this slideshow, hoping to be able to go through that, and that will help kind of paint the whole picture here. So I mentioned my name is Paul. I'm with Bowman Consulting. We're the civil engineer on this project, working with Valvoline. And we also have a couple representatives here, one from Valvoline. Mr. Tupper is here also, and then also the future owner who currently has this project under contract. So moving to the next slide, this is just kind of a general overview of the project that we're proposing here. So the overall site is 1.03 acres. It's about 100 feet in width and about 425 feet in depth. So a very narrow and deep site. The proposed improvements, it's an oil change facility, 2-bay oil change facility, about 1,700 square feet, and then all of the infrastructure improvements to support the use. And this table off to the right here is a breakdown of the site information. So zoning, CG, as it was mentioned earlier, required parking, I think is important to identify here. It's 7 spaces. What we're proposing for our current layout is a total of 10 spaces to meet the Valvoline standard for number of spaces that they typically like to propose on their sites. Moving into some setbacks, the front setback is 25 feet measured from the future right-of-way of Orangeburg Road. We have accounted for that in this plan. The side, both the north and south boundary, has a 15-foot building setback, and the rear is 25 feet. We meet that with with this current layout. Moving into the buffers, there is no front buffer on this one, but the side to the north, we have a type A buffer. So that's going to be a 25-foot wide buffer because of the adjacent use to the north of us, which is an existing Waffle House. We are proposing to use the reduction with the implementation of a 6-foot privacy fence. So we have a 15-foot width with the fence along that north boundary. The south boundary, the required buffer is a type BH buffer, which Tim had mentioned earlier. That type B buffer is a total 50 feet width, but there is a reduction to 25 feet with a 6-foot privacy fence. So that's what we're requesting the variance for this evening. With that type BH buffer, there is also the H component, which is based on a height to depth ratio. So for every 1 foot of height on your structure, you need 2 feet of setback from the property line. We are proposing an 18-foot tall building here, and therefore would have a 36-foot buffer or setback for the structure along that south boundary. We currently meet that. We've made some adjustments to the building and we're working with the architect to address that type H buffer requirement. And then the rear portion of the site is a type A buffer required for the adjacent use. We are proposing a full 25-foot width, no reduction with a fence along there. So moving into the next slide, this type B buffer is what we're requesting here. So similar to what Tim had in the staff report, the proposed use, the auto sales service, and the adjacent manufactured housing property to the south, it requires the BH buffer that was mentioned earlier. Just kind of reiterating that it's a 50-foot width, but can be reduced to 25 feet with the implementation of a fence. And so what we're proposing for this variance request is a variable width buffer along the frontage or along the front improvements of the site. So here, the highlighted portion is the variable width, is what we're calling it, buffer along the south line. And to speak to some of the widths of within this area, that kind of pinch point on the southwest corner of the building, that's about 9 feet of buffer width there. And then as you go back to the rear portion of the drive where that parking is, that's about 12 feet of buffer width. And we are proposing a fence along there, and we'll comply with all the landscape requirements. So to address the 4 variance standards and run through those quickly, the first one, extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property in question because of the size, shape, and topography. Here, the hardship that we feel applies to this specific property is the width of the property. It's 100 feet in width. While it's an acre in size, it's very deep and narrow. So the application of these buffers, a type A on the north and a type B on the south, greatly restrict the usable width of the property. So we feel we meet this standard because of the shape and size of the property. Variance standard B, explain why such conditions are peculiar to the particular piece of property involved and do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. Here, the property to the north, the Waffle House, that is surrounded by CG zoning, commercial uses. So they do not have a type B buffer on their property. Move into the property to the east, which is the existing public shopping center. That is a much larger overall site, about, I think, just under 10 acres. And so they have a lot more usable area and space that type B buffer would be applied to the rear portion of their site, that south boundary. That's kind of the call it back of house area, the truck route area. And so that overall property just has a lot more usable area to incorporate the buffer. And then moving into variance standard C, explain how, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance, this particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. So here, this is similar to our proposal in variance standard A, in that the application of the use buffers because of the adjacent uses significantly restrict the usable width of the property and restrict any sort of commercial development within that area. So that visual there is a representation of the red being the buffer areas, type A on the north and then type B on the south. And keep in mind that type B on the south that's shown there is the 25-foot width, so reduced with a fence. And then variance standard D, explain why the authorization of variance will not cause substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good or impair the purpose and intent of the ordinance or the comprehensive plan. Our proposal is not to eliminate this buffer. We're asking for a reduction in it. So we do intend to meet all of the landscaping standards, all other elements that apply within this buffer. Just asking for a reduction in it because of the width of the property. We are maintaining the H buffer that is a component of the use buffer required, the type BH. Made some adjustments to the building to facilitate meeting that setback. The only improvements that we have encroaching into the type B buffer is the drive aisle to the south, and that is an important drive aisle for the facility to operate. Vehicles will come in off of Orangeburg Road. We'll need to circulate back to the rear portion of the site to then access the facility, pull in, service vehicle, and then exit the facility. So that drive is very important to the operations of the site. And as I mentioned earlier, we are incorporating all the landscape, or will incorporate all the landscape plantings and include the fence. And then the other component that we are meeting the entire 50-foot width on the rear portion of the site. So we're tapering out to the 50 feet width where the improvements aren't shown on the property. We do have a stormwater area on that back portion. The next slide. So this is kind of in line with the variance standard D and the letter of support from the Tuppers who own this current site, but then also the property to the south. Mr. Tupper is here and present. We'll speak to this and can elaborate on a little bit more. And then Tim, if you could go to the last slide. This came up in discussion earlier, but after the staff report came out, we kind of wanted to look at the statement about the other permitted uses requiring less buffer width or developable area based on the CG, the permitted uses within CG, and the adjacent use categories that would have a less of a width buffer, the type A buffer. And so we've identified those there, highlighted Postal Service, Library, Arts, Entertainment. I think Tim was going through these earlier, religious institutions. So all of those I feel are larger layouts, larger buildings, larger sites that wouldn't necessarily fit within this 60-foot or 70-foot wide usable area. Keep in mind, all parking, all structure, all drive aisles, dumpsters, all of that would need to stay within that 60 or 70 feet. So, yeah, our opinion is that it would be very challenging to get those uses to fit on this specific site. And yeah, I think we, as the development team and the design team, would be open to any conditions along the south boundary, along the buffer that the board would want to entertain. Yeah, happy to answer any questions, and also have some of our other representatives here to answer any questions if needed.
Thank you. Actually, I've got a few questions to start off with. So I'm missing a point of orientation, but what would be, I'm assuming that you refer to the south side, that is the side that's most in question here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It appears that, let's call it 40% of the property will conform to 25 feet to 50 feet of buffer at the rear. And we're looking at reducing it from the sight line of the fence. Nope, we were good. Right. Yeah, there'll be a reduction or a narrowing as we get to the front, the way the drive is laid out. Which would actually be less than 15 feet in
Yes,
some
sir.
areas?
It is less than 15 feet. Yeah, where the cursor is now, that's about 9 feet in width, in buffer width. I think we have about 10 feet to the back of curb right there along that drive aisle. So we're anticipating a little bit of a disturbance and buffer between the back of curb. So about 9 feet in width there. And then as you get to the back of the drive aisle, it's about 12 feet.
And with the type A buffer with the fence, you are conforming on the north side
Yes, sir.
between Waffle House at 15 feet with the fence,
Yes, sir.
minus the jut for the sidewalk on the side of the building. Okay. Anyone else have any questions at this time?
Question for you. This is going to be, what you have here is like an oil change,
Yes, sir.
2 stalls?
Yes,
How are you
sir.
handling hazmat, tankage and everything that's going to be direct buried under the building or what?
Yeah, there is a pit. Tracy, can I ask you to speak to the, Tracy is with Valvoline and the operations team, so he can elaborate on that a lot more than I can.
Okay.
All right.
Would you like me to swear in?
Yes, sir, if you would. If you just promise to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I promise to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God.
All right.
So we
I also apologize. State your name for the record.
yes, my name's Tracy Helms. I work with QAS or Valvoline. Okay. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Question is, our product, our buildings have a full basement, and downstairs in the basement is steel oil tanks. All of our product is pumped from a truck about twice a month into those tanks, and then about twice a month, we have a recovery contractor that comes by, and he pulls the used oil out, and it's a pretty valuable commodity on the market. It's recycled.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have any further questions?
I do. First off, I'd like to say, great information. We don't often come across a whole lot of information such as you gave us. My question is, the side that you're more conforming to is Waffle House. The back portion is basically Publix, that whole area. So that's a major commercial area. We're still talking about moving the buffers from what the county has set to the next level down. We're okay with this. In portions on the mobile home side. We're getting even smaller than that, and then we're down to the 9-foot area with the drive, correct? Correct. With this being, and I know that Mr. Tupper is sitting in here, and maybe he can, answer this a little bit easier or whatever, but with all of this at play, since the Tuppers own all of that, the mobile home park and that kind of stuff, has there ever been any discussion about incorporating part of that property into this property so that we're not cutting down on these? Because at the end of the day, if we were talking about 9 feet on Waffle House side, I'm not crazy about that. But we're actually talking about where people live. So I need some convincing.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any sort of, I guess, additional acquisition on the south to then meet a required buffer. Mr. Tupper, could you speak, and then maybe also speak to the letter of support that he provided?
Come on down.
How you doing?
You promised to tell the truth, so help you God.
I tell you who I am first. George Tupper.
All right.
I do.
Go ahead.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all. And that's a very good question. So I am here on behalf of the family, and we do own both parcels. We're selling this to the Valvoline group, and we keeping the piece beside us. So I think to ask the question you're supposed to answer, the mobile home section of that is very far back. So if you look at this property, the front section that is adjoining to the adjoining line where they're requesting for the buffer, in our intent, will not be be turned into any kind of residence. It's all gonna be commercial. You got a Waffle House there, you got a car wash across the street, you got all these other things going on in there. So that's why we are in support of it, because where we are operating the mobile home business is further back. And if you can, so the part that they're asking for on that buffer variance will not impact the residential area. If you can, I don't know if you can show a plat there.
Mr. Tupper, yeah, go ahead.
So, so to see the, there we go. That's them. Okay, so all the way, so our whole front section of that is still undeveloped, and would be developed later as a commercial site comparable to the likes kind of what Valvoline has there now. There is an old house there. We built it in the late 50s, early 60s. That's where our milkers lived when we had it as a dairy business. So that's one old block building that's just still there and still in good shape, so it's got income, but it's, it's a get rid of thing. So the reason why we're definitely in support of it, they proposed to provide a high quality buffer for us. And I do understand your question too about the 9 foot, but I think their intent is to limit that as fast as they can. It needs to get around the building, and that's kind of why they proposed that they need to do that. And it is a unique lot. It is only so wide, so. Trying to think if I had anything else that y'all might.
So let me see if we, freeze it right there. So if, go back to where this parcel was highlighted, please. Yes, thank you. So
That is 2 different tax map numbers too, try to wait, Chairman.
it's, so kind of eyeballing on here, the same picture, the back of the Waffle House comes across this property to
Yes, sir.
where these two join.
Yes, sir.
And the proposed building for the Valvoline is gonna sit kind of, this would kind of be the bisecting line of front of building, back of building.
I think you're
So
correct.
We're still looking at quite a bit of space
Yeah.
where the entrance and some of the most needed, if a variance was to be granted, this would probably be in the section where it would be less than 15 feet as it tapers back in these drawings. So we may, because we don't have anything to scale, it's very possible that they meet this 15-foot buffer. That's the 15-foot. All right. So we'll be more to the back, which there's the front. So here's about the property line of the front piece. I'm not here. So this is pretty much the most, sorry for the terminology, most egregious interruption of the 15-foot buffer.
And
Which really affects more of this front piece.
But-
I'm just talking
no,
for scale
I,
and
no,
representation.
this is a great way to look at it because
Yeah.
it does. But with that being said, this front piece, how is that zoned?
The front half of that,
This front piece, is that zoned
Zoned,
residential, commercial?
Mixed-use community, which allows residential and businesses. It's a really goofy zoning district that we struggle with when it comes time to development.
It's a little
I
bit.
think that what I'm looking at is what I was stating earlier. Since we are operating the mobile home business in the back part of it, that we would be at some point looking to rezone that to the comparable zoning that Valvoline is requesting. I guess that's the hardest part, is it is zoned to show residential, but it's not, but they're not proposing to put it beside our residential portion of the property. And we understand that'll be our next step, is to rezone that at some point whenever we feel that we need to develop that.
And Ms. Harper, it is zoned mixed-use community, could have business or residential, but it currently has a residence on it, which
But-
is why we're in the
but-
position we're in.
Regardless if the residence is being used or not used.
Right.
it's
Well, it is being
still-
used,
there's
and we have-
still considered residential.
Yeah, well, it's being used, and we have had instances along like Central or Dorchester where there's a vacant building, and we've had to determine, like, it's zoned commercial, but there's a house there. And we've actually had them provide water receipts from the previous 2 years to determine that it no longer is a house. They haven't had water on for 2 years, but they're currently using this as a residence. So that's why staff is limited in what we can do and why they're here.
There are also a lot of properties that are facing Orangeburg and Central in that whole corridor that are flipping
Yeah.
from residential to being leased to
Yes, sir.
become
Yes, sir.
houses flipped to commercial use, whether it be office space, et cetera. But still, as it stands, even though there are residences there, they could make the applications, make the plans, bulldoze it, and throw up a strip mall, in due process.
And on behalf of what Tim is saying, there's been a lot of that situation where somebody has rezoned their property to a commercial, and you know this. But then they stay on it residential until that point. Even, you still can have a residence on that commercial. But good question, Ms. Harper.
No, and I just want to state, I'm very familiar with all this stuff.
Yes,
Deal
you
with
are.
it,
Yes,
deal with
you
it a
are.
lot.
Yeah. And that- and like I said, we
So
just-
sometimes that is the reason why I'm the big meanie on the board, because I do understand,
Yeah.
all of this stuff. Y'all got to understand that I still, and just being honest with you, I'm still on the fence about, if somebody asks me, if I have to go in front of, I'm going to try and take all the information, I'm going to say, this is exactly what we're doing, this is exactly where we're going.
Yeah.
Part of this, and I have no doubt y'all are going to take this and turn it.
Next
'cause
step.
Y'all know this area, we know what's going on in that area, how things
Right.
are growing. But at this point, I still am kind of feeling like this is what we would like to do, but we haven't done it yet, and we're talking about doing it. So just trust me in the fact that we're going to do it.
We don't move,
but I need-
none of the tempers move very fast.
And none of this stuff moves fast. Turning it
Yes, sir.
into the county, turning it into the town, no matter who you're dealing with. None of it moves fast. I understand all of that. But I'm still on the fence about the fact that you guys are asking me to trust you.
I get you. But there currently, the operation of the mobile home park is further back. I know there's that one block house there, but you'd have to see
I
this.
I understand, but just, you understand how this board works. And so our job is to determine, but we still have to follow a lot of the rules and regulations. That's our job.
So
That's what we're sitting up here doing for free.
I believe this is a can that we've kicked along many a time in trying to be as accommodating as possible within reason and law. But if I understood what you said earlier, you really have less of an issue with the boundary between this proposed project and the Waffle House.
I don't, on that side, they're
The
still
north side.
conforming, the side with Waffle House, they're still talking, is the extra buffer is. So we're going from 15 or 25 feet to 15 feet or 18 feet, whatever it was. But on the side of the property that's still zoned residential and, the mixed residential, et cetera, that's where we're talking about a 9-foot buffer.
That's correct, and that's the point, that was where I was leading up to, as to the lesser of the evil, maybe, to cheat a little of the other buffer because it is non-residential, it is commercial. I don't think Waffle House is going anywhere. I mean,
I know Waffle
they're,
House doesn't go anywhere.
they're a national barometer.
It was a genius who
per
built in
se.
Knightsville.
Say again?
I said, whoever built a Waffle House in Knightsville was a genius.
Absolutely. I mean, there's going to be a pickleball court. I don't know. The jury's still out on that.
It is.
But anyway, being the architect, the engineer, with the planning, if the board saw fit to cheat a little bit to add buffer, to keep that buffer more conforming on the south side, since to cheat a little bit on the north side may have less relevance.
Which I assume that the entry is there because it's adjacent, directly across from another entrance to the shopping center.
That's correct.
So, but could the building itself and everything be pushed over, leaving the entrance there the same? Has that been explored?
So there is a 15-foot building setback line along that north boundary too. So if we were to shift the entire site north to try and make the buffer on the south larger, we would likely be encroaching, in that 15-foot building setback, which is,
What about 5 feet?
that would increase the south buffer
To 14 feet. You're a foot off.
14-ish feet, correct. But we would, I guess, at that point, be asking for a variance for the building setback on the north as well, a reduction to that. And one other thing, just to keep in mind, we do have the dumpster on the rear portion of the site. We put it on the north side to get it away from the south boundary, the other residential manufactured housing on the south. That would be shifting as well to the north, so that would encroach in the building setback line too.
Well, I imagine that you'll probably have this type of facility would have limited waste, and we're not talking about food and other kind of things.
That's correct, and it would be a fully enclosed matching
Correct,
building.
and all the actual contaminant and commercial waste is disposed of by DHEC standards and wouldn't be commingled with regular office debris or, from the business.
I just want to make sure that everything is kind of being considered as the ideas are flowing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's good to know.
That's why we're going back and forth. To kind of trying to talk.
Yeah,
sense
because
through.
if I'm looking correctly, the dumpster, the proposed dumpsters back up to the backside of Waffle House, so it may be a welcome,
It is
who
a
knows?
side of it, yes.
Yeah. I don't know,
But it's, that is the kind of businesses are going, and I know you're talking about other types of businesses going there, but then you're looking at parking, and, there's a limited amount of parking for this kind of business. And there's not another business like this in this area. I mean, build another car wash somewhere on top of that. Please,
Can you pull up
please.
the list of the type A that they provided in the PowerPoint? There. So I do agree, this would be very difficult.
Add parking?
Have you considered any of these? I mean, would any of these even be an option that you've considered?
But they've been they've come in with a plan, and we're great to work with, and it's a type of business that's not in that area at all right now. And you know what's happening to that area.
Yeah.
So, it's a need. It's a business that has a need over there. They're not duplicating. You already got an AutoZone here and you got two of those.
O'Reilly's.
You got gas stations here and gas station there. I don't know that you put in a library there. We already built those.
Well,
I
space
just
too.
don't see a
Space for a library.
restaurant that I don't think there's a restaurant person I could put there across the street where the old Piggly Wiggly, what used to be, what's it called now, Graco, and all of, they got all theirs with no buffers, because they're all inside a compounded, whatever you do, however they do the bigger area. So,
Has
the
there,
business they're proposing is a need in that area. And it's not a duplicate of another one that's already there. So we were trying to help accommodate to get them there.
I do have the strange off-the-wall question. What are your hours, working hours?
7 to 7, 6 days a week. On Sundays, depends on what the community wants, but it's usually about 9 to 5 on Sunday.
Okay. And just so I'm being completely open about the question, the reason why is because of the elementary school right across the street. And how any sort of, because that is one thing that I have, there's so much traffic there. Is there any proposals at all to widen that intersection down those roads?
a realignment of Old Orangeburg is in the works.
That whole Orangeburg Road corridor is on the books.
It's on the
My daddy
books,
was
and
on
we
the
know how
committee
fast that
in the
can move.
70s talking about it. So
I know,
I will tell you how long it's been talked about. And the
Ms.
people
Harper?
that I know have said that, yes, it will at some point get widened, but you know how that.
And
the DOT
it could be the Berlin G.
There you go.
So
There you go.
it could be the Berlin G, but with the Berlin G going out there,
Hoping that's what we'll do.
the overall, look down satellite, look into this area, that road's got to be widened. There's no way
I don't
that
think without-
Rangeburg and Central
Oh, yeah, you're,
and are going to be able to handle, even with Berlin G, you got all those people coming off there, so
it is
if,
proposed to be
if-
widened and.
if we're thinking about, I need you to trust me on this, I'm going to have to put out there that the way that I look at the road being widened, we got a 50-foot buffer up front that's going to be cut in half
That'd be a deal.
Yeah, so,
when the road gets widened.
yeah, so we have coordinated this site and this plan with SCDOT, got their preliminary feedback from the district. That was one of the items that they mentioned. Tim had actually mentioned that during our early discussions for this site. So we are incorporating the 60-foot future right-of-way from the center line. That's shown right there on the plan. And then we have our front setback measured from that future right-of-way line. So the site currently incorporates that future widening width. And SCDOT gave us preliminary feedback on our access point. They're going to restrict it to a right-in, right-out driveway, so we have a typical pork chop in the driveway, and it won't be a full access movement.
So I can make sure that I heard correctly. I know it was mentioned, I guess there was no other ingress egress capabilities, but was it ever looked at a possible exit only? going out the back of the property behind the Publix?
To an adjacent property. I'm not aware of any.
What I know about that property is you got, the Waffle House has got a retaining pond.
They
It's
do.
It's a pretty good size.
And then there's one in the corner in the back.
Right, and it's, yeah, I don't know how they would get out that way and then go through the Publix. I think you would,
Staff,
as DOT is, I think, addressing that.
just one question about that, because I thought, and I could be very wrong about this, so that's why I want some clarification. Publix, that shopping center, is that Dorchester County or is that town of Somerville?
Yeah, that's Dorchester County.
And where Waffle House is at and everything, all of that is Dorchester County?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dwight, Mr. Dixon, y'all mighty quiet down now.
I'm doing more listening and
It is.
don't have any questions.
If everybody's satisfied, gentlemen, please take a seat. We won't
Y'all,
close
thank you for your
comment
time,
because
Chairman. Thank you.
some of these things, they may pop back up. So
Yeah.
y'all feel free to take a seat. And seems like there's a lot of different angles and ways to cut this and try to work with it. So I guess there's probably room for discussion before we really kind of piece together a motion of sorts. Who wants to kick us off?
You guys don't have any questions? Y'all don't have any questions
This is
or
more-
discussion?
This is more conjecture for me, you know, listen to the crystal ball here, how things are gonna go, how things are gonna move, so.
Just since we're having discussion, I guess I'll get started. I do believe that this area needs something like this. It's an up and growing area as far as the density out there is getting bigger, the density is getting more. With that being said, however, I am still not comfortable because I still feel like we're, making a decision on a promise that that's not going to be residential over there. That it's not going to continue to have the mobile home park and everything else, which, if I was in that shoes, I would be wanting to get rid of the mobile home park and turn that into commercial. As far as money and everything else is concerned, absolutely. That's a bigger venture. You make more money that way. But at this point in time, I still feel like we're making a decision with the neighborhood right next door. On the side where the 9-foot comes in. I am happy to see just the in and out, I apologize, I don't remember what that's called. I'm happy to see that because that will help with traffic, because again, the traffic in that area is horrible, which someday they may or may not fix that. Yeah, and I don't really see how. I've never tried to talk to Publix or any of those people to see if we could, do an exit onto their property and stuff. Like an egress out of there and everything. So I don't know how difficult that would or wouldn't be. I don't know anything about that. To help kind of move things, because because in that instance, if we were just worried about one car going down the side of the building because everybody exits out the back. But in this case, we're having to have cars going both directions. So that's what makes it wider and cuts it down to that 9-foot on that corner.
So then let's identify the detriment of your uncomfortable position in relationship to the building, the encroachment of the 15 feet where it may be down to 9, do you feel comfortable that the front property, which is now still in a quote-unquote residential state, that you're not concerned with that as far as it potentially being used by the property owner for commercial in the future, given that it is such road front?
Okay, so I apologize. I'm going to start with,
Don't apologize.
this is how I'm going to run with what I'm stuck on, where I'm stalling. The 9 foot, which is why we are here, it starts at 50. We cut it down to 25. Okay, great. We cut it down to 15. But that area right there is 9 feet. In that area right there, no matter what is next door, if it's commercial, if it's residential, if it's anything else, I feel as though we're just like, no, y'all just do whatever you want. You don't have to have a buffer over there at all. We have rules and laws that we follow in this county, and it's our job to find the gray area, to find that little bit of a variance or whatever. I feel like this is a huge ask. As you proposed, is there any way to shift it a little bit to make it 14 feet? At least, okay, we're talking that 1 foot from the rest of the 15 that's there, but we are already going from 50 to 25 to 15, and then we're asking to get down to 9. I have sat on this board long enough, Mr. Chairman, you have, and everything else. I don't remember approving anything with a 9-foot buffer, and especially something commercial. And then on top of that, we're trying to make a decision. The thought has been brought forward to where now it's out there, all of us are thinking about it, about the fact that, well, we're going to take this and we're going to turn it commercial. I understand the thinking behind that. Again, that's where I would want to go with it. But at the end of the day, we're being asked to trust them. This isn't anything that's in black and white.
I just got an off-the-wall question. We talked about this is a growing area. What is your capacity right now for this business? How many vehicles can you service or accommodate at one time?
Our goal in this store is 30 cars a day.
30 cars a day. Okay. My question is, if it's growing in the community, are there any other better sites than that where you don't have to, okay, we got a bunch of car washes here. Every other street is a car wash on the, and banks. We just knocked down right at the intersection of 78 and North Main. I understand it's going to be a bank next to the cleaners. In other words, a better plan, maybe something that would, and I don't know the area well, that would be maybe centrally located, but would accommodate more and would be more conducive for growth. You wouldn't have to have little checkered service points, if you will. Have you looked at that?
Well, we love the community and we want to be there. Obviously, this is not the best site in town.
Yeah. And I'm just speaking conceptually now for your company.
The economics are, all property's expensive. We're actually a very low count service provider. 30 cars a day is not that many, so we're limited to how much we can spend on property. And it's a budget, it's in a great town, great location.
Oh, yeah.
So,
All right.
does that answer your question?
You answered it.
It's like a bank or a lot of things, they're gonna be a lot more than 30 cars. out service, they're in there 15, 20 minutes, and they're out of there in another, whatever time they're in. But, you know, a lot of other businesses will come in here and park, whether you put a restaurant there or whatever, they will park, and then more people come in, you know, bank, they will come in and out.
In and out, in and out, in and out.
I think it's about a low impact traffic.
So this would follow that same pattern, in and out, in and out, in and out.
It's probably the least cars that you would see coming to a business of this type of.
My only, talking about the detriment, you know, this is a very gray or opinionated area. The property owner to the south has stated it is not a detriment. So, you know, but there is the part in there about, you know, to the public good. So I think that's the part we need to consider. And then utilization. One thing I didn't realize is that, the type A, there's not a whole lot that could go on an acre property and actually have enough parking, you know, to support something like that, especially where this property is located. So that'd be my only, you know, the 9 foot definitely is an issue, I think. But uses, I mean, it's kind of a hardship here too. You got an acre property in a fantastic location, but, you know, if you cut down the buffers to that type A, I don't think anything can go in here. So that's where I'm coming from.
I think this is where I get back to, there are other things that could go in there. What they're proposing, that area does need. I absolutely am, you know, agreeing with that. But I still don't, you brought up the letter of, you know, agreeing to it and everything else. It's family members.
But they do own.
So they own all of this. You own all of this. So, I mean, we have the letter. I've read it. We've all read it. I don't, because it is family that owns all of that, though. I would like to see that property line moved. I would like the family to get together and say, okay, we're gonna slice off an extra 15 feet over here on this side. Then it's gonna be able to sit in there, and then everybody can do whatever they want later. And I have been party to something like this as well. And it is doable, and it got done. But if not, again, we're back to trusting that this is going to end up being commercial. Trusting that when the county does decide to widen that road and everything, that they don't just wipe out the front of everything. So
What if that was a 15 foot on
I would
the
be
south side?
happier if it was 15 foot. But I mean, we're down to 9 feet.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
We're 9,
That's
that's only, what, 3 feet taller than you are?
Give
Yeah,
or take, right.
yeah,
But no, you're
exactly.
right, you're right. And then the precedent, possibly, I mean, granted this location, but I'm a little concerned about that buffer
Mm-hmm.
going down that small for future
Yeah, for
people coming
anything,
here.
because what ends up happening does, whoever business decides to go in there, once they do make it commercial and stuff, are they paying the price for that cut down in there and everything ultimately?
Mr. Chairman, my opinion on it, I guess you're waiting on my opinion. We down to 9 feet, that kind of bothers me. And if it wasn't 9 feet, I would go with what presented to me. And some of the things that Becky had said is right on the point. Right on the point. And also Mr. Dixon over here by me, some of the things that he said is right on point. I just don't think I can vote with this.
It did sound like there was some
It-
possibility to move things over, to sharpen the pencil on that site plan.
Well, yeah, it's some things can be done and moved around. I agree with you on that, but they haven't presented that to us as.
Well, so just more of a proceedings thing, since I'm still learning. I don't know if I'll ever be
Oh,
at
you-
a certain level to be confident here. But is this a situation hypothetically where it could be tabled to ask the applicant to come back and see if there's any alternatives given, with the same use, but I think they know our feedback about the north side of the property on the Waffle House side. So now that they know that, if they come back with, an alternative.
Let me.
Well, yeah, if you,
No,
go ahead,
no,
go
please,
ahead.
sir,
You go ahead.
Finish your thought, please.
I agree with what you said. If they would go back, regroup, sit down, look at some things, you see how we feel. Come back with our answers. And maybe you may leave out the door happy the next time.
Yeah, I hear you would say.
So, let me say a piece real quick, and we'll get back to that. If you could zoom out from this. All right, so we're looking at decades of growth in this intersection. Okay? 1564, 1566, 1544, all of those were residences.
Yeah.
The commercial use of this property is slowly fading out the residential need for all the road front. Commercial sales for property are what bring the premium. This individual intersection has grown from the Carl Knight Convenience Store, which a lot of people don't even remember, to a national chain Publix, to a McDonald's, to 3 auto parts stores, to a hardware chain. Albeit, there's a school here at Devon Road, Knightsville Elementary. I may be misspeaking, that school was built back in the 70s or beyond. We have O'Reilly Auto Parts. I believe we made some sort of concessions with the fence here for the boundary. We have an old building here that was converted from a house to a general store. We have a pickleball court that we already made judgment on that's gonna be built back here. We have a Zaxby's, we have a Dollar General. How much more time, and we can't contemplate this piece of property, whether it's gonna be commercial, whether it's gonna be residential. We have to look at its current use. All that being said, the commercial growth along these corridors is purely evident. For a building and a business like this in this place, the use fits. It does. We're in contention of maybe a 50-foot stretch right here is what we're dealing with, to where there'll be a 6-foot fence. There will be shrubbery. We can even denote how much more shrubbery we want in that area to contain or create more privacy or buffer if a variance was to be put forth. But we're talking about what could be 50 feet right in here. And you think about, there's only a wooden fence, and I don't think there's any planting, any buffer between all of these trailer parks and that O'Reilly's.
And how long has the O'Reilly's been there?
I don't know, 2-3 years now,
About 3 years,
if that.
3 or 4, yeah.
Yeah, probably 2-3 years.
And pickleball? You brought up
Pickleball,
the- You brought
it's-
up the pickleball.
It's still in planning and still
Yeah.
coming forth, but
I
I've,
wasn't any part of that, so I don't know anything about that.
Last meeting.
So that's something that I would have to look into,
yeah.
just so we're
But,
all
you
on
know-
the same page. But if we're gonna do this,
No.
if we're gonna do this, can Kira, Parkers, what kind of buffer do they have?
That's actually in the town of Somerville.
All of these over here have their buffers. This has been here forever. Any of us that have been around here for a long
Oh, it's
time
Piggly Wiggly.
absolutely understand this area.
Yeah.
There are houses up here on Central that I'm sure you're aware of that have turned commercial, restaurants, et cetera, and everything else.
Oh, right on back.
There's a couple of them that they're working on right now that have huge buffers up front. and everything. And yes, I think,
Are they spatial buffers or
This is
are they
where-
visual buffers?
because they're being turned commercial, these houses right in front of Publix, that are being turned commercial, I don't know. Kira would probably be the one to answer that question.
They won't have a fence
If-
along the road line.
If we are going to forget about the mobile home area, then we've just forgot part of our job. Because part of our job is to take in consideration what kind of detriment this could have impact on neighboring properties as they sit, not what's coming in the future, as they sit. So as this sits, we've gone from 50 to 25 to 15 to 9
9.
on what is technically the closest thing to a residential area. The other side is all commercial. We can't go fuss at Waffle House for not having a whole bunch of stuff up there because Waffle House has been there, Publix has been there, all of those things have been there. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is this piece of property and the stuff that's right around it. And so that's why I kept bringing up the fact that if we're gonna make a decision on a promise that that's what is sitting today as residential is going to be turned into commercial, I have no doubt it is. I have no doubt that it's going to. But tonight, if we're going to make a decision on this tonight, we need to stay in our lane and remember that we are talking about this property and the properties that touch it.
Very well put.
Grant this 9 foot, what's that gonna do in the future when somebody else comes before us?
Right.
What was
We
that?
have to stick with the 9 feet, or we have to go back to?
I think
I mean, we
that,
can't turn somebody down if they come, am I right?
Yeah, all of this is
I
tape
believe
recorded,
you're-
all of this is tape recorded, all of it is on video, everything else. If somebody's doing their job, if they're coming in front of us for a variance, they can pull all this stuff up. They can hear all of our arguments. They can hear everything that has been said, been brought up, et cetera. So I think that's a very valid point, that what's going to happen with us, our decision-making in the future, if we go ahead and allow a 9-foot buffer for a business.
each case has its individual circumstances.
It does.
all I can
That's
say.
that gray area I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, so, yes, sir, Mr. Tupper, please.
I'm so sorry. But, Ms. Harper, I agree with you, and I really appreciate the due diligence. And that, I guess what I'm trying to say is, as representing the family and the property owner, I'm not asking for any kind of variance against anybody else's property. I'm asking for it against our own. So if I'm putting anybody by asking for the variance of this side, it is on the side that we would be, hurting ourselves in the future. And the other biggest point about that is there's no residence that's affected against that buffer requested zone. All of the residents are further back. And I know what you're saying, it's undeveloped. The area up front is undeveloped. So all of where the living people are living
So
yes, ma'am.
I appreciate that, but at the end of the day, we're still down to zoning and how those particular pieces of property are zoned tonight. I'm not talking 5 years from
Right.
now, I'm not talking 10 years from now. I have no doubt what you guys are going to do with all that property.
Right.
I have no doubt what y'all are, going to end up doing with it eventually. But again, with you bringing to our attention again that that's family property and y'all are right next door, has there been a discussion about slicing off
That's
just
not.
this much?
That has, and they're not available.
And the
And so I can't answer, but with the situation with the family there, no, we couldn't move that property line.
And there are extenuating circumstances that are particular to all this because he or his family are the owners of the piece for asking for the variance and the co-joining pieces.
We're not
Any other applicant may not have that kind of ability to go before family to try and chop it up. They would have to deal with a separate landowner.
I understand, but this is where, when we're talking about this, and we have suggested this to applicants in the past, that you go talk to your neighbor, see if you can buy a little bit of their property.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that, any of them were related or anything else. They had to go knock on a door and play nice with their neighbor and see if they could, purchase part of it. That's why in this situation, I would think, because of the fact that that is family entwined property, that in that case, it would be a little bit easier to have done. And I'm not saying,
It's not-
I'd say, I get all that as well. But
At the end of the day, if anybody gets hurt, we're hurting our own self by allowing a buffer. But yeah, thank you. You're very due diligent on that. Thank you a bunch.
and please, I want y'all to know, I'm not picking on you.
Yeah.
You can ask all of these guys. I
No.
do this to a lot of people.
She picks on us.
I pick on these guys, yeah.
Can I ask a question real quick? Just-
Absolutely.
Please.
Just as the design team, I mean, it sounds like the 9 feet is the concerning area, right? Going back, I think, Ms. Harper, to what you were saying previously, I don't think I caught it. Did you say what sort of width you not speaking for the entire board, but what you
Well, yeah. and
would
that-
find
yeah,
acceptable?
No, I know exactly what you're talking about, because that comment was during board discussion when I was speaking. Chairman had brought up earlier discussion, asked if there was any way to potentially move the building, do something like that to where that south side could end up being like 14 feet. To where y'all would be in here asking us for a foot instead of, as much, yeah. So, and that's why that was brought up. I don't know that, I would rather hear from y'all that you're asking for 14-foot buffer opposed to a 9-foot buffer.
Sure,
Yeah, I would love a 25-foot buffer, but we don't always get what we want. And that is our true job, is to try and follow code, follow the rules and everything else, find that gray area if there's a gray area. 9 feet does not present a gray area to me.
Yeah, okay, so we were kind of talking just about the site layout back there while you all were discussing, and I think there are some adjustments that can be made to
That would
help
be brilliant.
increase
That would be brilliant.
the buffer. I do think that we would then be in a situation where we would be requesting a variance on the building setback on the north
Based
boundary.
on what you heard, you know our feedback.
I'm,
I think, I can't speak for
Right,
everybody.
and
So because these things get kind of gray sometimes, if I'm not mistaken, if the board ruled in favor with conditions, they would not need to reapply if our conditions were a realignment?
If you approved with conditions and they were able to adhere to those conditions, they would not need to be able to apply. If
To
they-
reapply?
Correct. If they, in going further in the design, were unable to comply with those conditions, they would have to then reapply.
Correct. So then we could table, they could make adjustments that have been discussed and recommended and come back before us next month. And we can look at their adjustments and with conditions, if we were so satisfied, we could grant the variance.
Yeah, if they bring back a site plan next month that you feel meets the requirements for hardship, you can approve it, you could place conditions on it. Yeah, there wouldn't be any issue with that moving forward at that time.
Okay.
Just to clarify something, if we were to introduce a variance to a building setback, that's different than what our application previously said, would that need a separate application or?
No, I think it would just be a modification to your existing application.
Okay.
And we would notice it accordingly.
All right, I'm gonna go on a limb and say I think that's a lot of news we wanted to hear. At this time, we will close discussion, and, board is open to a motion.
I'll make a motion that we table this application until next month and give the applicants a chance to present alternate site designs based on what they've heard tonight.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion? All in favor, vote by the usual signs. Aye, it's unanimous. Gentlemen, thank you. Think y'all read between the lines. So, thank you for your patience and willingness to work with us, because it's what we aim to do. All right, at this time, we have no old business, but new business. We do have election of officers, if I'm correct, because we made an amendment to some of the bylaws. So at this point, we will elect the chairman. Are there any nominations for chairman?
Nominate you.
We have a nomination for Mr. DeHay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, vote by the usual signs. I can't believe y'all did this to me. I'm telling you what.
Well, you want that. You want that. Let's get out of here. You want that. Okay.
It's the thing, you're so smart.
Resign. We hadn't elected you took over.
No, thank you so much. I really enjoy working with all of you, and all the wisdom y'all bring does well. And we now have an election of vice chair. Are there any nominations? We have a nomination for Ms. Harper. Is there a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? All in favor, vote by usual signs. It carries. Ms. Harper, congratulations. I plan to be absent the next 3 months. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway.
That was not fair.
I have no report. Thank you all for being safe. Thank you for being committed to be here. A report from the administrator?
No report for me.
Thank you. Anyone for public comment? Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, please.
You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All adjourned.
I can't.